Welcome to Daily Motivation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not always easy to recognize the signs of a bad person at first glance. They do not always appear as the villains in stories, and they do not always wear dark cloaks or sinister grins. No, the signs of bad people can be far subtler, creeping into our lives in ways that are often hard to see. Yet when we learn to spot the characteristics of these individuals, we begin to understand the true nature of their harmful influence, self-absorption and narcissism. At the very core of bad people lies a deeply ingrained self-absorption, a complete and utter preoccupation with their own thoughts, needs and desires. They view the world through a narrow lens, where everything is filtered by how it affects them personally. Every situation, every conversation, every decision is centered around their own gratification, their own comfort, and their own sense of importance. It's as if the world revolves around them, and everyone else is just a supporting player in their personal drama. This level of self-absorption doesn't allow for the recognition of others as independent, valuable individuals. Instead, they exist only as background characters, or at best, as tools to help fulfill the selfish desires of the narcissistic individual. The signs of narcissism are often apparent in the way these individuals behave in their relationships. They seek admiration, not for what they do, but simply for who they believe themselves to be. Every compliment they receive, every recognition is never enough. There's always a need for more. They thrive on validation, and when they don't receive the attention they crave, they react with frustration, anger, or passive-aggressive behavior. To them, their worth is measured by how others perceive them, and this insatiable need for admiration governs their actions. Their self-esteem is fragile enough that it's completely dependent on the praise and adoration they receive from the people around them. This narcissistic mindset also manifests in a lack of true emotional connection. These individuals cannot see beyond themselves long enough to empathize with the emotions or needs of others. In their eyes, others are merely an extension of themselves. Either they serve a purpose or they do not. When interacting with people, their primary concern is how they look in the process. They manipulate the situation, angle conversations, or engage in behaviors that ensure they come out on top, even if it means stepping on others. Relationships, to them, are transactional. The concept of genuine care or unconditional love is foreign, because everything is measured in terms of benefit to themselves. In social settings, they crave the spotlight, and when the attention is not on them, they subtly or overtly attempt to draw it back to themselves. It might look like shifting the focus of a conversation to their accomplishments, or exaggerating their stories to make themselves seem more important. This need for constant validation is not driven by insecurity alone. It's an essential component of their identity. Without the admiration and attention of others, they feel small, invisible, and irrelevant, which triggers feelings of anxiety or aggression. Furthermore, their narcissism can be manipulative. They play on the insecurities of others, making them feel inferior or unimportant to boost their own self-worth. They don't hesitate to belittle or diminish others in order to elevate themselves. The more attention they receive, the stronger their sense of self becomes. Whether or not the attention is positive or negative doesn't matter. As long as they are seen, they are satisfied. The dark side of narcissism emerges when the individual's sense of entitlement becomes evident. They start to believe that the world owes them everything: success, admiration, power, and respect, simply because they exist. They act as though others should cater to their every whim, and they show little to no regard for boundaries or the feelings of those around them. Their sense of superiority fuels this entitlement, leaving them blind to the fact that everyone else is deserving of the same respect and consideration that they demand for themselves. Self-absorption and narcissism are at their core mechanisms of self-preservation. The narcissist builds a fortress around their ego, continuously reinforcing their sense of superiority and entitlement. They are so invested in maintaining their inflated self-image that they become incapable of genuine connection, true growth, or self-reflection. Their lives are an ongoing search for validation, often at the expense of the people around them, leaving a trail of hurt and frustration in their wake. At the heart of the bad person's behavior lies deceptiveness, a calculated effort to twist the truth, disguise their true intentions, and hide their real motives. The bad person understands that trust is the foundation of all human relationships, and so they use deceit as a tool to manipulate and control others. They don't just lie casually. They weave intricate webs of falsehoods designed to confuse, mislead, and ultimately serve their own needs. What makes this deceit so dangerous is its craftiness. The lies they tell are not obvious or easily spotted. They are cloaked in half-truths, plausible explanations, and calculated omissions, making it nearly impossible for others to see through their deception without careful scrutiny. Their manipulation extends beyond simple dishonesty. It is a deliberate tactic to gain power, control, and advantage in a situation. The bad person is constantly assessing how to use people for their own benefit, and they employ manipulation to achieve their ends. Emotional manipulation is one of their most powerful weapons. They understand human emotions and know exactly how to play on the vulnerabilities of others. They might make you feel guilty for their own mistakes, or exploit your insecurities to weaken your resolve. They can make you doubt your own perceptions, questioning your judgment and making you more susceptible to their influence. They will distort situations, rearrange facts, or pretend to be someone they are not, all in the name of achieving their own desires. What's truly insidious about these individuals is their ability to create a false sense of trust. They often portray themselves as caring, reliable, and honest individuals, drawing others in with their charm and seemingly genuine demeanor. Once this trust is established, they use it to their advantage. They might get you to make decisions that benefit them. The trust they cultivate is not a mutual bond built on respect. It is a means of control, a subtle way of getting people to unknowingly carry out their will. They also have an uncanny ability to play on emotions. They might feign vulnerability to elicit sympathy, or feign anger or disappointment to guilt others into complying with their demands. They know that emotions are powerful and can cloud judgment, and so they use them as tools to steer others toward the outcomes they desire. Whether it's playing the victim, claiming to be misunderstood, or fabricating a crisis, they know exactly how to manipulate the emotional landscape of a situation to their advantage. The deceptive individual is also prone to gaslighting, a particularly dangerous form of manipulation. This involves making others question their reality, memories, or sanity, often by denying events or conversations that have clearly occurred. The manipulator may insist that something never happened, or that you misunderstood the intent of their words or actions. This strategy is designed to leave you feeling confused, insecure, and unsure of your own perception of events, which makes it easier for them to control the narrative and keep you off balance. Another hallmark of a manipulative person is their ability to exploit weaknesses. They know exactly where to strike, where you are most vulnerable, where you feel most insecure. They might use this knowledge to exploit you, to gain something at your expense. It could be something as simple as using a shared secret against you when it serves their needs, or something more sinister like taking advantage of your loyalty or trust to manipulate you into doing their bidding. Every interaction is a calculated move, with their own benefit always in mind. The ability to deceive and manipulate is also rooted in a lack of moral conscience. Where others might hesitate to deceive or manipulate, bad people do so without remorse. They do not feel guilt or shame for their actions, because they view the world in terms of power dynamics and control. Others are simply pawns in their game, and any means necessary to gain an advantage is justified in their mind. This lack of moral consideration makes them particularly dangerous, as they can rationalize any action that furthers their goals, no matter how unethical or hurtful it may be. Deceptiveness and manipulation are not isolated to moments of extreme pressure or crisis for these individuals. They are consistent and calculated strategies woven into the fabric of their character. They engage in these behaviors because, to them, it is the easiest way to get what they want. Manipulating others is not an anomaly for them. It is the rule. One of the most striking characteristics of a bad person is their glaring lack of accountability. They are rarely, if ever, willing to own up to their actions. When things go wrong, they will go to great lengths to avoid facing the consequences of their behavior. This refusal to take responsibility is not a mere slip-up or a rare occurrence. It is a pervasive trait that defines their interactions with the world. For these individuals, acknowledging their own mistakes is seen as a weakness, something that threatens their carefully constructed image of superiority or control. Instead of admitting fault, bad people often resort to shifting blame. They will deflect attention from their own shortcomings and point fingers at others, finding scapegoats wherever they can. If things go awry, it is never because of their own poor choices, lack of judgment, or negligence. No, it is always someone else's fault, whether it's a colleague, a friend, a partner, or even circumstances beyond their control. The burden of their errors is always placed on someone else's shoulders, leaving them free from any repercussions. When confronted with their mistakes or destructive behavior, a bad person may go further by downplaying the situation, minimizing the impact of their actions. They may act as if the problem is not as serious as others perceive it, brushing it off as an isolated incident, an accident, or something out of their hands. This tactic is a way to escape responsibility without having to face the full extent of their wrongdoings. By trivializing the issue, they diminish its significance and avoid taking the necessary steps to make amends or to learn from their actions. Moreover, when accountability is truly unavoidable, these individuals may attempt to manipulate or control the narrative in their favor. They may twist the facts or revise the timeline of events to portray themselves as victims or as blameless in the situation. They may use charm, intimidation, or emotional manipulation to convince others that they are not at fault. Their ability to distort reality is a key part of their avoidance strategy, as they work to make others question the validity of the complaint or concern, thereby absolving themselves of any real responsibility. This lack of accountability is particularly dangerous in relationships, whether personal or professional. In a personal relationship, for example, a bad person may continually deny their faults in arguments, always pointing out the flaws or mistakes of their partner while never acknowledging their own. They may make promises they don't keep, and when called out they will deflect, gaslight, or simply make excuses. The result is a toxic dynamic where their partner is left feeling unheard, misunderstood, and constantly blamed for issues that are not theirs to own. In professional settings, the bad person's lack of accountability can be just as destructive. They may avoid taking responsibility for errors in the workplace, allowing the consequences to fall on others. Whether it's a missed deadline, a failed project, or a poor decision, they will make sure someone else carries the weight. Their unwillingness to own their mistakes creates a culture of blame and mistrust, as people begin to resent the unfairness and dishonesty that permeates their actions. Others may become disillusioned or disengaged, knowing that no matter how much effort they put in, the bad person will always take the credit for successes and shift the blame for failures. This avoidance of accountability is rooted in a deep fear of vulnerability. A bad person cannot afford to show weakness, to admit that they are not perfect, or to reveal the possibility that they may have done something wrong. To do so would expose the cracks in their carefully constructed armor, and so they evade responsibility at all costs, even if it means deceiving others or eroding trust. In their minds, admitting fault is equated with losing control, and so they hold tightly to the illusion of invulnerability, no matter the cost to those around them. In extreme cases, the lack of accountability can spiral into a pattern of repeated mistakes. When bad people refuse to learn from their errors, they continue making the same harmful choices over and over again, perpetuating cycles of harm and dysfunction. Their inability to reflect on their actions or to take ownership of their behavior ensures that no growth or positive change can occur. Instead, they remain trapped in a state of denial, incapable of evolving or improving, because they never fully confront the reality of their own actions. A lack of accountability, therefore, is not simply about dodging blame. It is about the refusal to engage with the consequences of one's behavior in any meaningful way. It is a denial of responsibility that perpetuates harm, undermines relationships, and erodes trust. At the core of the bad person lies a chilling cruelty and indifference to the suffering of others. Unlike those who may cause harm unintentionally or out of ignorance, the bad person takes deliberate pleasure in inflicting pain, whether emotional, psychological, or physical. They are not just willing to cause harm, they are eager to do so. The cruelty exhibited by such individuals is not driven by a need for self-preservation or survival, but rather by a deep-seated desire to control, dominate, and break others down. To them, inflicting suffering is not an unfortunate byproduct of their actions. It is a means to an end, an expression of power, and sometimes even a source of personal satisfaction. This cruelty often manifests in emotional or psychological torment. Bad people are adept at targeting the vulnerabilities of others. They know where to strike, where the pain is greatest, and they will exploit these weaknesses without hesitation. They may engage in verbal abuse, using harsh words, insults, or cutting remarks to undermine the self-esteem of their victims. This form of cruelty is often subtle at first, perhaps disguised as harsh truth or tough love, but over time it erodes a person's sense of self-worth. The bad person revels in watching their target shrink under the weight of their words, feeling a twisted sense of triumph as the victim becomes more fragile, more dependent, or more broken. In more extreme cases, their cruelty takes a physical form. They may engage in bullying or even violent behavior, deriving pleasure from inflicting harm on others. They might engage in cruel acts toward animals, demonstrate a lack of empathy for human suffering, or even derive satisfaction from watching others suffer in distressing situations. The key difference here is the complete indifference to the pain caused. Where a compassionate person would be moved by the sight of others in distress, the bad person is unmoved or even pleased. They don't care about the harm they do. In fact, the harm itself may be seen as a measure of their power and control. This indifference to the suffering of others often extends to a complete lack of empathy. Bad people fail to see others as individuals with their own needs, desires, and emotions. They view people as objects, tools to be used, discarded, or manipulated as they see fit. This emotional detachment makes it easy for them to exploit others without hesitation. In their world, the pain and discomfort of those around them are inconsequential. Others exist only to serve their own needs, and if that means trampling over someone else's well-being to get ahead, so be it. In relationships, this cruelty can take a more insidious form. A bad person might be charming and loving at first, using affection to manipulate or ensnare their victim. But once the person is emotionally invested, they might switch to behaviors that are cold, controlling, or downright cruel. They might engage in gaslighting, making their victim question their own reality or feelings, or they might use emotional manipulation to keep the victim under their control. By keeping their targets in a constant state of confusion, doubt, and emotional turmoil, they maintain dominance and feel more powerful. The cruelty exhibited by bad people also often comes with a disregard for justice or fairness. They are willing to break rules, hurt others, and disregard laws or moral codes if it means they can get what they want. To them, the needs and rights of others are irrelevant. If someone gets in their way, they will remove them without hesitation, using any method at their disposal to eliminate obstacles. The idea of fairness doesn't enter into their decision-making. Their actions are driven purely by self-interest and the pleasure they take in dominating those around them. Their indifference is not just to the suffering of others. It extends to their own moral or emotional growth. They don't reflect on the impact of their actions or feel guilt for the harm they cause. Where a compassionate person would feel remorse after causing harm, the bad person moves forward with no real reflection, only continuing their cycle of cruelty and domination. This combination of cruelty and indifference creates a toxic and dangerous environment for those around them. Relationships become unbalanced and toxic, communities become fractured, and individuals lose their sense of safety and security. In the world of the bad person, others exist only to be manipulated or controlled, and their suffering is inconsequential to the bad person's larger goals or desires. At the core of every bad person lies a profound inability to feel true empathy, a fundamental disconnect from the emotions and experiences of others. Empathy is the ability to understand and share in the feelings of another person, to step outside of one's own perspective and truly grasp what it's like to walk in someone else's shoes. For a bad person, this capacity is either severely underdeveloped or entirely absent. This inability to empathize is not due to a lack of awareness, but stems from a profound disregard for the experiences, needs, and suffering of others. Bad people are often characterized by an inability to recognize or care about the emotions of those around them. They may appear indifferent when others are in distress, and this indifference is not a temporary lapse, but a permanent feature of their character. While a compassionate individual would be moved by someone's pain, a bad person remains untouched, unaffected by the tears, the hurt, or the struggles of those they encounter. It's not that they don't understand what others are feeling. They simply don't care. This emotional detachment allows them to act in ways that others would consider cruel or heartless, without feeling any guilt or remorse. They may make decisions that directly harm others, whether it's in relationships, at work, or in social settings, and show no regret for the consequences of their actions. To them, the suffering they cause is inconsequential because they cannot truly experience the pain they inflict. When they see someone else hurting, it might register as a mere inconvenience or even as a source of amusement. They may derive satisfaction from others' vulnerability, using it to manipulate or control them for their own benefit. The lack of empathy often manifests in their interpersonal relationships, where they struggle to connect on a deeper level with others. They may have a superficial understanding of social niceties, but when it comes to true emotional connection, they fall short. They cannot tune in to the unspoken needs or emotions of those around them. A friend's sadness, a partner's fear, a colleague's anxiety, all of these may be ignored, overlooked, or trivialized. Instead of offering support, comfort, or understanding, the bad person remains distant or even dismissive of the emotions of others. In some cases, their lack of empathy is replaced by manipulative behavior, where they may mimic empathetic responses for the sake of gaining something from others. They might pretend to understand or care, offering false comfort or empty words to manipulate the situation in their favor. However, these displays are shallow and insincere, a calculated effort to deceive rather than an honest attempt to connect with another person's emotional state. They may pretend to listen, nodding and offering empty platitudes, but their focus is always on how the situation benefits them, not on the well-being of the person they are supposedly empathizing with. This emotional blindness also prevents them from engaging in the necessary process of self-reflection. Since they cannot understand the emotional consequences of their actions on others, they fail to see the need to change or grow. They are incapable of acknowledging the emotional toll they place on those around them. The idea of making amends or apologizing doesn't resonate with them because they simply don't understand why their behavior should be viewed as harmful. As a result, their relationships are often shallow, transactional, and emotionally exhausting for those who try to engage with them. The inability to feel true empathy creates a toxic environment wherever these individuals go. In family dynamics, friendships, or workplaces, they may dominate conversations, disregard others' feelings, and manipulate situations to suit their own needs, without any regard for the emotional fallout. People may begin to feel isolated, used, or misunderstood in their presence, as their emotional needs are ignored or dismissed. This detachment from the emotions of others ensures that the bad person remains emotionally isolated themselves, unable to form deep, meaningful, or healthy connections with those around them. In the end, their inability to feel true empathy leaves them blind to the rich, emotional lives of others. They exist in a world of their own, disconnected from the shared human experience. And as a result, they perpetuate cycles of harm and misunderstanding. In conclusion, the traits discussed, deceitfulness, lack of empathy, selfishness, cruelty, and an inability to take accountability, paint a clear picture of the bad person. These individuals operate in a world that revolves around their desires and goals, with little regard for the well-being of others. Their actions are driven by manipulation, indifference, and a disregard for the consequences of their behavior. They lack the emotional depth and moral compass to truly connect with others, instead using their charm and tactics to control, deceive, and harm. The absence of accountability allows them to escape responsibility, while their cruelty and inability to feel empathy make them a constant source of pain and dysfunction in the lives of those they encounter. Ultimately, the bad person is defined by a relentless pursuit of self-interest, indifferent to the suffering they cause along the way.